Now begins really the real work of moving all of that soil back to here and starting to work on the leveling part. So okay, day 2, here's where we're at. I kind of left off last night by finishing up just a little section here. Well, it's not really finished yet. Put down some of the soil on this section and started using my leveling tool. And I'll explain all of this coming up here on the portion that we're going to work on today. But I got probably about a third of it done, and then it got dark, so I had to go inside. I think I'm actually wearing the exact same shirt today as I was in my last renovation video from last year. So maybe that's a sign of something. I don't really know what. But okay, let's get to work, get ourselves all sweaty again, and move a bunch of soil. Of course, probably the first question that most people are going to have is what type of soil to use if you're going to do leveling work here, and also why am I using soil versus maybe sand or some other material like that. So let's go over that really quickly. So my native soil is of course a clay type loamy mix. So that's a good base to start with here for me in general, because it holds a lot of nutrients, holds a lot of moisture and all those things. So if we're just talking about wanting to level a yard, then actually we can use sand to do that, and it would probably be the best option if we were only going to do leveling. The first time we'd want to do that, we'd likely want to come core aerate, then sand over top of that. Despite having seen many opinions about that online, about that creating concrete in your yard, I'll post a link down below to an article from Michigan State University on the sand capping method that you can do on native soil, and how they've been doing this for years and years on golf courses and also on sports fields and things like that. So that research there is going to tell us that that layer of sand up on top is not going to indeed create concrete, but it will be okay there and does give some benefits in terms of other things when it comes to high-end turf. So do you want to get into that in your home yard? That's a question you have to ask yourself, because it's sort of a point of, once you get that sand going down, you have to kind of maintain it. You have to do certain things with aeration. And over time, if you do some sort of project, you're not going to really want to dump a whole bunch more topsoil on top of that sand layer, because then you're creating layers in the soil. So it gets sort of complicated quickly, and it's why I've been really considering when to use sand in my yard, and or if I'm going to use sand. And I think for leveling purposes in the future, I will be, but this brings us all the way back to what are we using when we're going to level, but also seed. And that's a major difference there. So there's leveling you can do in your yard, but if you're also going to be seeding, as in this project I'm doing here, topsoil is going to be much more forgiving for that new seed. It's going to have nutrients in the soil. It's not going to dry out as quickly. I prefer soil, and I think in any homeowner's yard it makes more sense, unless you have a very good grasp of how to grow it in sand, how to keep up with the watering, how to add nutrients appropriately. And so it's just much more forgiving for us to use some topsoil. I also told myself this year that I was going to get some kind of machine to move all this soil around, and guess what didn't happen? Alright, I told you we were going to get sweaty. So after I move soil into place, here's where I start. I just take a regular garden rake, and start to move these piles out a little bit just to make it easier to spread with our leveling tool. Now you don't really have to do this, you could just come in with the leveling tool, but I found that if you spread it out first, it just works a little bit better with that leveling tool. So now comes this leveling tool that I'm talking about. This tool has been amazingly useful in my lawn renovations in terms of leveling. I bought this thing last year before I did my whole side renovation, and it turned out great, and I'm using this thing again this year and it's still working fabulous. So I have the 30-inch version of this rake. Basically what it does is just helps to smooth everything out all in one motion, and you just move around in different directions. You keep moving the soil until things get pretty flat and even, and when you're moving across the surface with the rake, you just kind of feel like everything is looking pretty flat. It's not really dragging soil one way or the other anymore. As I get to the end of using this tool, I usually kind of just very lightly am skimming the top. When I first start out, I'm kind of putting some pressure into it, working the soil down into the kind of dead grass that's still there. But once you get done, this also is nice at the end. You can just kind of skim over things. And you're just gonna have to keep working on this over and over in multiple areas depending on how your indentations are. Here I have some that are probably close to 1.5 to 2 inches. So you want to stay on the high side of that, drag the soil into the low areas, and then just kind of keep working it until it's looking pretty good. From there, we're going to use a roller to come in, roll down the soil that we just put down and try to flatten it a little bit. After you roll, you'll be able to kind of tell where you still need to put a little more soil in. Use your leveling tool again, roll it again until you're feeling like things are pretty nice and even. All right, here's where we're at so far. So we have one initial round of soil down on the whole area and rolled in, and then right now I'm just going back. I'm starting at this beginning part here, and I'm just going piece by piece, little by little, finding the low spots, putting a little more soil in there, dragging it a little bit more, rolling it in, and that's really the whole process. So you can kind of take as much time as you want to on that part of it and just kind of take your time. Like I said, you can also just kind of say whenever you feel like it's done, and so it's up to you. But I like to go through this part here pretty meticulously just to make sure that on this first round I'd spend as much time as I possibly can to make it as level as I can before I get the seed on there. Got a high spot here, high spot here. So the width of it allows you to come through and just basically rake that like that. The middle now is even with the other pieces, and once I roll that in, I'll see if it needs just a little bit more, but that's the benefit of using a wide tool like that. It works really well. Now, I have no idea why they designed this way, but if you look at this roller, these edges have a lip on them that are taller than the middle part. Makes absolutely no sense, and I wish I would have figured that out before I bought that thing. But so what happens is you move along, and then you'll see this line right in here going all the way down. That's from the edge of it because it's not completely flat. So I have no idea why they would have designed it that way, but if you're gonna get a roller, pay attention to make sure it's flat all the way across. All right, so it's mid-afternoon now, and here's the problem with having a perfectionist personality is I'm still working on this thing because I walk away, I come back and look, and then I see something that I obviously think I need to change or make better. So I've just been doing my best here to kind of try to not nitpick the whole thing, but it's kind of usually what happens. So then I might look at just watering it down just a touch, see if we can get some of this to kind of stick together and hold together, and then we will be moving on to the next steps. So I took a pretty good chunk out of here as far as how much I used. This was 5 yards of topsoil, and if I had to guess, I'd say I probably used maybe close to half of it, or maybe a little bit less than half. Gives you an idea a little bit of how much I used and what you might need for your area if you have some pretty decent leveling to do. Now, if you were just top dressing and kind of putting like 1/4 of an inch onto, or 1/2 an inch on your soil or something, then you probably would not need nearly this much, but I had some pretty large areas to cover, so that's why I used what I used. Wonder what that's doing in there. Another project going on the inside. Definitely don't want to show this old carpet on video.